it's cool to see these guys develop and get in on the ground level, see how they progress as men, but then see the mutually beneficial arrangement that comes out of that. And so I've been happy with that. Not every deal is going to be $1 million deal, as we've said, but that's not the point. The point is making those connections, getting deals done, regardless of the number, and good things are going to happen.
And specifically at Penn State, and I think that's one of the things that, at least as state media, with our involvement and our partnership with the collective, like what we're trying to do is create an environment that is reciprocal, right? Because I feel like initially this thing was so transactional, where it was give us money, thanks, we appreciate it. If you want to come watch practice, great. But it's like all of those things are it's so hard to kind of tie, like, what to you as a normal fan who may not have a ton of money, disposable income to put behind this, what moves the needle for you to participate?
And by the way, there's risk in that, and there's risk in everything that we do. And so you might contribute, and Penn State might lose every single game next season. But guess what? You still need to help and support the team. And you and I don't have to like it. But the reality is that it's changed, and the biggest change has been NIL. And if you are a college football fan, if you're a Penn State football fan, and you want to have a competitive team, a competitive roster, you have to buy into NIL.
Quarterback sneak right side, touchdown, Penn State!
College football tees, college basketball tees, whatever you need, Mercury has you covered with the best merch out there. We're talking about high quality clothing, inexpensive, and the best part is I have a 15% discount for everybody who goes and gets some right now. Use the code below, hit the link in the description, and go get your merch now. Use the code to get 15% off. What are you waiting on? Go do it.
What's going on, folks? We are launching the Retain the Roar campaign here at State Media in partnership with Happy Valley United. This is extremely important to me personally and the entire program moving forward. I came to Penn State in some of the darkest times. I deeply care about this university and this football program. That is why I'm done talking. I'm going to lead by example, and I'm working to pull a bunch of other lettermen together to get behind this campaign. It is integral for us to participate in NIL, and not only participate, but dominate, to match the expectations that we all have for this program. We're in it to win championships, so let's put our money where our mouth is. I'm taking the first step. I hope that you all follow me. Our goal is to raise $500,000 to close this spring transfer portal cycle and ensure that we retain the roar. What's going on, folks? Christian Hackenberg. I'm doing a solo one of the pocket today, but we got a very good friend of the program, Mr. Rob Riva. He is the general counsel and VP at Dreamfinders Homes. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay, good. Based in Jacksonville, Florida. And he, like I said, he's been a fantastic comrade of the program. I appreciate it. I've gotten to know him now for over the past few months, and kind of peeling back here. I know we were getting off the NIL topic. We're running the Retain the Roar program or campaign, and you just stepped up big time, and we really appreciate that. But we're going to get back to this topic because I think it's important, and especially right now where college football is and the uncertainty that there is with the NIL landscape and what's going on. I've been very vocal about it, but I just feel that the more folks we get engaged here and talking about it, hopefully some of this stuff starts sinking in and opening up dialogue. I'm not trying to drive the narrative one way or the other, but I think at the end of the day, dialogue leads to solutions and problems being identified and then ultimately solutions to those. So Rob, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I know it's a super long-winded intro, but I'm really excited about this conversation.
Likewise, I am too, and I think it's important, and it bears repeating in the context of this discussion, and that is that college football, as we've known it for the last 10, 20, 30 years, is over. Yeah. And you and I don't have to like it, but the reality is that it's changed, and the biggest change has been NIL. And if you are a college football fan, if you're a Penn State football fan, and you want to have a competitive team, a competitive roster, you have to buy into NIL. And again, you don't have to like it, But the reality is that's where we are right now. And it's going to continue to change. I mean, things are moving at a lightning pace. But right now, where we are is that players are allowed to earn money off their name, image, and likeness. And if you want to get the best players on your roster and you want to field the best team that you can, you have to support NIL. There's really no other question about it at this point.
Yeah, and I think we've been extremely vocal about that. And I kind of want to unpack the layers of that onion, though, right? Because I feel like we've gotten to a point now where it's not necessarily paying for your name, image, and likeness. It's straight paying for players, and that's a completely different discussion.
Sure.
And the general concept of this, it's funny, I had Mike Portman on here, who was one of my professors my freshman year. And that was when, if you remember, the Northwestern team was trying to trying to unionize and collectively bargain.
Sure.
This is, 2013.
Sure.
All that got shut down. But one of the topics of the class, it was like a sports industry class, a COM, like 100 level intro type course. But I had to write a paper on, being on the one side of the fence of student athletes or student athletes ultimately being able to get paid, protecting amateurism or being paid. And I took the pro being paid stance, but not because I think that kids should be getting paid an astronomical amount of money. I just think the industry and the business of college sports has gotten so big. And the fact that players, and specifically football players, and I won't beat around the bush, it drives revenue for for a lot of the other sports programs within the universities across the country. But the amount of value they bring doesn't necessarily equate to the old school, like, oh, well, you're getting your scholarship paid for and your books paid for. It's not apples to apples discussion anymore. And I think that, to your point, with the floodgates being completely cracked open, it has put fans in a really tough position because morally you may not agree with it, but fundamentally you have to if you want to put your team in a certain realm or area code with the big dogs. And it's tough, man. And specifically at Penn State, because this place has always done it its own way. And then just change in general hasn't happened a lot around this football program. It's just put us in a really shitty spot. And trying to get proper messaging out is tough. What has your experience been like participating in NIL from its inception? What are some things maybe that you like about the current model? What are some things that you ultimately would change about the model?
What's going on, y'all? Christian Hackenberg with State Media in the Pocket. This segment is brought to you by Utz. Utz has a phenomenal line of potato chips and other snacks. We were fortunate enough to be able to enjoy them all weekend. They kept us fed and ready for all of these interviews that you all are about to enjoy. They've been a fantastic partner of ours, and we're looking forward to continuing to bring you guys exclusive content here at State Media.
Sure. That's a great question. And I'll take one quick step back. I think you're being very diplomatic when you say that, football is driving revenue for the other sports. I think particularly at Penn State, what a lot of people may not appreciate is, there's 30 some odd varsity sports at Penn State. And of those 30, 2, maybe 3, are operating in an area where they're not running a deficit. And so you have football, basketball, perhaps wrestling at Penn State that are supporting all of the other 20 some odd sports, right? And so that's not to say that there aren't good athletes anywhere else, because there are, very clearly. But there's a lot of mouths to feed, and there's only a few sports that are actually generating the revenue to support them. And so that's kind of a rising tide raises all ships type metaphor, where if football's doing well, if basketball's doing well, wrestling, maybe hockey is doing well, so is women's basketball, so is field hockey.
And Rob, to not to cut you off there, but you bring up a great point. What I think people miss that, right? Like Penn State has 30, like you said, 30, I think it's like 31 or 32 varsity sports.
Right.
There's schools like Clemson that have like 18.
Right.
So you're talking dollars and cents now with the amount of dollars that ultimately come in from fundraising can be disseminated. So we're almost fighting not an uphill battle, but to your point, there's more mouths to feed. And the general consensus with NIL is that it is for everybody.
Right.
So that's why it's even more so integral that we participate because of the amount of athletes we have. And then subsequently, we boast the strongest alumni association in the country, or one of the strongest, so it just kind of makes sense that we would be able to compete there. But I think that's a great point, and I'm sorry to cut you off. Continue.
No, and that's all great points. I mean, and the last point that you made is one that I've really harped on, which is, when you're a freshman at orientation at Penn State, one of the things that they hammer you on, and for good reason, is that the Penn State Alumni Association and the alumni make up the largest dues-paying alumni association in the country. And so from day one, you are taught that once you join this family, you're in it for the long haul, right? And we expect you to support us. So you can take that messaging and apply it to NIL, in my opinion, which is we've got a lot of alumni out there. We've got a lot of passionate, a lot of smart, a lot of successful alumni out there. And they need to be also now, with where we are today, thinking about supporting NIL. And so, when you touched on my experience with NIL, as soon as I saw that players were going to be able to make money off their name, image, and likeness, rightfully so, I said I wanted to be a part of that, because I knew that if you can do that, if you can make money off your name, image, and likeness, you're a commodity now. I mean, that's the reality. And so you're going to see what your value is in the market. And if you can make money, you're going to make money. And so if you have a player at any sport that can generate a certain amount of revenue based on what the market says that they're worth, you need to support them, because otherwise, if you don't, they're going to go somewhere else where it is supported. And now, thankfully, up to this point, and I think Coach Franklin deserves a lot of credit for this, Penn State has not had a lot of what I would consider significant losses to the transfer portal, and certainly not because of NIL. But you don't want to wait to see for that to happen, right? And so you don't want to lose a Drew Aller or a Katron Allen or a Nick Singleton because they're sitting there and going, my market value in NIL is worth X, and we just don't have the money at Penn State. And then they go to Alabama, or they go to Clemson, or they go to Texas A&M. I mean, you don't want that to be the lesson that gets people to finally realize you got to be on board with NIL. And the other thing too that I think is important is, things are changing minute by minute, hour by hour. You've seen it. You're already talking about collective bargaining and revenue sharing. All of that's fine, but what people need to realize is, as we sit here today, that's not what's in place. The rules are that players are entitled to make money off their name, image, and likeness. And if you want to win a Big Ten championship, if you want to win a national championship, if you want to make the playoffs, you have to have a roster that is built to support that. And one of the main components of that now is having your war chest for NIL funded to make sure that you're, compensating the players. And I don't use that term lightly. I mean, you are compensating the players. But again, to back to the original point that you and I discussed, you don't have to like it. You don't have to, you can take a very principled approach, and you and I may agree, we may disagree, but those are the rules, right? I didn't make them, you didn't make them, but those are the rules, and those are the rules that we're going to operate within. And right now, the rules say that these players can get paid. And so I do recognize why some folks might be a little hesitant to support that. I think it's frankly justified, because it's such a different concept that has come so very rapidly. But those are the rules right now. And so you have to operate within those rules in order to make sure that you're putting out the best product that you can.
What's going on, folks? Good listeners of The Pocket. Sky's out, thighs out. Summer's right around the corner, and our friends at Chubby's are bringing the good vibrations. Whether you're getting dressed for your workday, a workout, or a weekend getaway, Chubby's has you covered. For a limited time, Chubby's is giving our viewers 20% off your order with our code POCKET at chubbysshorts.com.
chubbiesshorts.com. That's code POCKET at chubbiesshorts.com. Versatile line of men's apparel. I'll tell you what, man. I got the 6-inch Khakinator shorts on. Phenomenal. Super versatile. I can already see myself wearing these shorts on the short porch this summer, on the boat while I'm fishing. Definitely can make a round of golf for sure happen. Probably even swim in these puppies. Super high quality, everyday men's apparel. I highly recommend you guys check them out. Fortunately for you, for a limited time, Chubbies is giving our listeners at The Pocket 20% off your order. Support our show and tell them we sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. Yeah, and it's it's so hard because I'm not, to your point, I'm not naive to like the folks who already are spending tons of money and they see, and specifically at Penn State, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, at least as state media with our involvement and our partnership with the collective, like what we're trying to do is create an environment that is reciprocal, right? Because I feel like initially this thing was so transactional where it was give us money, thanks, we appreciate it. If you want to come watch practice, great. But it's like all of those things are it's so hard to kind of tie like what to you as a normal fan who may not have a ton of money, disposable income to put behind this, what moves the needle for you to participate? Is it access? Is it events? Is it, if you're a business owner, is it the ability to pay a player like Drew Aller and then get him to be a sponsor or a representative of your business? Like there's so many different ways to skin the cat and bring value, right? And I think that is integrally important moving forward for Penn State, because you made a great point. With collective bargaining and all this stuff coming, NIL's still going to be here because the cat's out the bag. Mm-hmm. It's just going to shift from players who are getting paid are going to be getting paid from the schools, the conferences, however it's structured. But then there's still going to be a market for this. Mm-hmm. There always has been. You were competing with the SEC back in the day under the table. And that's why I think when you now bring it to light, those folks are so excited because like, we don't have to hide this anymore. There's no more brown paper bags and runners. Like, here you go. So we have to get adjusted and acclimated to that culture. And it's not like when collective bargaining comes around, like this issue still goes away. We still need a competitive collective for additional income for these players because it's going to be out there in the market elsewhere.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it goes again back to the original point that I made, and that is college football as we've known it for the past 10, 20, 30 years it's over. It's done. Yep. And you and I have no say in that anymore, and neither does anybody else. And so you can either get on board, which is fine, or you cannot, which is also fine. But if you don't want to get on board, don't complain when you're not making the playoffs. Don't complain when you're going 6-5 and going to the, whatever bowl game.
Bowl,
Right. I mean, that's the bottom line is, to me, it's, you don't have to support it. I think it's, and I fully understand why people may be hesitant to do that. But then the trade-off is you can't then complain because we now have a framework of rules that we have to work within. And if you aren't willing to work within those rules for whatever reason, whether it's a principled reason, whatever reason it is, that's up to the individual. But I will say that at that point in time, you can't complain if the team is not doing well. And that's also not to say that just because you have the biggest NIL collective means you're guaranteed to win a national championship. We've seen what happened with Texas A&M. I mean, they've probably been an anomaly, in my opinion. I mean, they seem to generate a ton of money, but they hemorrhage players left and right, despite having great recruiting classes. So there's a middle ground, or at least a middle point. But the bottom line is the rules have changed. I don't have to like it. You don't have to like it. Yeah. But we're going to have to operate within those rules. And right now, what those rules say are that these players are allowed to make money off their NIL. And so you have to support that. The one thing I would also add, Christian, is that I think a lot of credit goes to James Franklin, because he has really done a good job on a variety of different fronts, one of which is to, reach out to the donor base and explain to them the importance of NIL. But I also think he's done a good job selling the program itself. And you haven't had a lot of players, as I mentioned before, a lot of what I would consider, star players, material players, leave the program because they weren't getting paid. And so I don't think you can overstate the importance of having someone like James Franklin at the helm of your team who can make sure that your team is staying together, even if you might not have the largest NIL collective out there, because that's part of it. That's important too. And so I think that's an underreported story. But all you have to do is look at the roster retention and who Penn State has been able to bring on, into the fold. And it's been, I would say, significantly better than most programs out there. And it wasn't because Penn State's sitting on the biggest pile of cash in our NIL collective. It's because, it's a combination. There's NIL, but there's also the environment that James Franklin is putting together. And I think that's important.
And that's a beautiful thing. And Coach has done a great job. And the one thing I will say, at least from my experience as well, is the logo still does sell itself. There's a few programs in the country that I think no matter what, the logo will sell itself. And I think that's the kind of catch-22 here is what if we bolstered this couple percents, right? 10% better, right? What could that unlock with the fact that the alumni, the bigness of what that logo means does? So let's dive into this a little deeper. Like I said, I asked you an extremely long-winded question. What are some of the things that you personally have enjoyed from participating in NIL? And then we'll get to, after that, what are some things that you would change and what are some things that you may not enjoy as much?
Sure.
We got a new sponsor. Have you ever heard of Mando? Well, now we have Lume for Men. It's the same clinically proven, doctor-developed formula, but in cologne quality scents for men. That is the best way to put it. And I'll tell you what, they got me hooked. I used it every day. Full body deodorant, body shower gel, bourbon leather, the Pro Sport. Every single product has been used and approved, not only by myself, but my wife. And that's also very important. So with that being said, I want to give you all a fantastic opportunity. Get Mando's starter pack. It's perfect for new customers. Cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice. Mini body wash, which I highly recommend. The deodorant wipes are also fantastic because you can take them on the go, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off of your starter pack. Use code POCKET at shopmando.com. Shopmando.com.
Sure. Well, on the things that I enjoy, I candidly have enjoyed developing relationships with players that I otherwise would not have had an opportunity to do that, and their families, frankly, because it's not just that I'm reaching out when I do a deal with my company, when I do a deal on my own. I'm not just dealing with the player, I'm dealing with their families. And so on setting aside the money that's involved, I've enjoyed getting to meet and develop relationships with a lot of these players. And, I'm hopeful, and I know that they are as well, that they're going to go off and become stars in the NFL. But the reality is that most aren't, right? And so it's developing that relationship. It's relationship building. It's not necessarily the amount of money that they're getting for whatever services that they're providing in exchange. So that is one thing that I genuinely have enjoyed. As far as things that I would change, it's a tough question because my answer could change tomorrow based on whatever rules are going to change. But, I think one thing that would be important in my mind, or that I would change, is I would have more involvement with the Alumni Association and our NIL collectives and the football program, because I believe as so goes the football program, so goes the Alumni Association. And a lot of people don't necessarily realize this, and hopefully I'm not crossing any lines, but the Penn State Alumni Association has almost $100 million in free cash sitting in their account as we sit here today. And that's a credit to them, because they've done a phenomenal job with that. But it also goes back to what you said before, which is we've got the largest alumni or largest dues paying alumni association in the country. And so it would seem to me that if you can harness that same demographic and shift it slightly towards NIL, you're going to have similar results and similar successes. But I would also say that $100 million sitting in the account of a nonprofit alumni association is an awful lot of money. And I would look into what within the rules you can do to perhaps facilitate some investment or transfer of that money to a collective. Because I can tell you, or one thing that I am certain, is that if Penn State football were to win a national championship in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, one of the biggest beneficiaries of that would be the Alumni Association. And so I think that there needs to be some thought given to how you make that work, even if you have to be creative, because I'm confident that there's a lot of other schools that are doing just that. And it's the schools in the SEC, it's the schools in the ACC, and it's the schools in the Big Ten. But what I would say, and I would encourage all of the viewers here, is look into it yourself. Look at how much money is sitting in the Penn State Alumni Association right now that's not marked for anything. And that's a nonprofit. And you don't need to have, a decade's worth of operating expenses sitting in cash just for a rainy day fund. I don't think that's a good use of that money. Now, it's not to say to be flippant or anything with the money, but there's money sitting there right now, paid for by Penn Staters who largely support Penn State football. Let's figure out a way to make this mutually beneficial. Again, this is a new horizon. This is a new area that people are going into. But I just can't, in my mind, Christian, I cannot get over the fact that we're talking about trying to raise money for NIL collectives and scraping and crawling and all of this. But if I go down to the Hints Alumni Center, there's $100 million in cash that's just sitting there. And I think that is something that really needs to be looked into a little bit more. Again, not saying you have to give $100 million to Happy Valley United, but imagine if you took $10 million, that's 10% of what's there, and just figured out a way to move it over to Happy Valley United. That would go a long way in making things a lot better for Penn State NIL.
No doubt. And I'm sure that there's some way where, again, like you said, the reciprocal nature of what NIL is, where, again, the football program outside of winning can facilitate value for that exchange, which could ultimately probably refill those coffers pretty quickly, right?
Absolutely.
And the simple one is winning, which is what you brought up. And, the one thing that I will say that I've heard from folks too, which is interesting, because again, I'm a pretty sensical thinker. Like if someone says something and the point's there, like, hey, I'm not going to argue it, but then I'm also not naive enough to like die on a mountain when the reality of the situation is what it is. I think we've beat that home. But the one thing I hear a lot with is some people are frustrated with the success or what they define as success on the field, which is tough because a lot of programs would die for where we are right now in terms of swimming in the lanes. We've unfortunately just had a few really good programs with some really good football coaches that have been on some runs, but everything's cyclical, and staying the course and being ready when the opportunity comes is extremely important. And it's tough to tell a fan that, as a guy who's been in the locker room and game planned and seen all that stuff. It's like, listen, like it's not the fact that it's, 3 or 4 plays, or 3 or 4 players. It's just those 2 or 3 plays in a game that are 50-50 things. And ball hasn't seemed to bounce our way yet. You know what I mean? So what would you say to the people who are saying, well, for me to participate, I need to see more on the field? Before we get to the next topic, we're going to take a minute to talk about Factor Meals. Now, I know that there's a ton of food delivery service options out there. I'm going to stand on the table here and say this. Factor Meals does it different. Pre-prepared,
chef crafted, dietitian approved. We've gotten a chance to test them here at the Pocket. I just got mine this past week. Phenomenal meal, super easy. Throw them in the oven. Like I said, they're pre-prepared. Pop them out, throw them on a plate. I'm a new father, got a wife. I'm unfortunately the one that does the majority of the cooking in the house. So whenever I need a break, this is a great option for me. Meals, 2 minutes or less. They got snacks. They got smoothies. They got little juice drinks. It's super flexible. It fits into my schedule when need be. No mess. I also do the dishes. So therefore, minimal dishes when it comes to preparation with Factor meals. Really, really, really highly recommend them for your day-to-day operation. So if you like what I'm talking about, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, please head over to factormeals.com/pocket50 and use code pocket50 to get 50% off. That's code pocket50 at factormeals.com/pocket50 to get 50% off. I know that's a lot of pocket 50s, but you guys get the gist. 50% off to cut into about 75% of your meal prep time. Phenomenal, and I highly recommend it.
Sure. I would love to talk to those people. I really would, because I have a lot of things that I probably wouldn't say on this podcast. Yeah. But, I think number one is you can't be fair weather, right? If that's what you want to be, then I don't have much more to say. If that's how you want to operate, then that's how you want to operate, and more power to you, I guess. You hit on the main point that I would say is we're in the top 10%, if you want to say, of the programs. And I would rather be in the top 10% than the top 12%, than the top 15%, than the top 20. I mean, we're a perennial top 10 team, top 13 team. And as you said, there's a lot of programs out there that would die to do that, right? I'll say something perhaps that's a little cynical, but I think there's a lot of folks out there who pine for some of the old days with, and there's not a bigger Joe Paterno fan than me. Up in my man cave, it's Joe Paterno everywhere. But the reality is the last 10 years of his coaching career were worse than what we have right now. And I don't think that there was anyone during that time who would threaten to stop supporting the program or threaten to stop going to games, because the attendance was still there. But those were 9-3 teams, 8-4 teams, 7-5 teams. And so I think you have to really readjust your perspective when it comes to that and say, look, I may not be happy with the results on the field, or I may want to go undefeated every season. Look, that's me. You're preaching to the choir. I want to go undefeated and I want to win a national championship. But the reality is that there's help needed to get there. And you sitting there and taking a very, I'm going to die on this hill, and until I see a 12-0 season, I'm not going to contribute or I'm not going to help. I think it's counterproductive. And so I think you need to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And by the way, there's risk in that, and there's risk in everything that we do. And so you might contribute, and Penn State might lose every single game next season. But guess what? You still need to help and support the team. So I think it's very short-sighted and very, I'll just leave it as very short-sighted to say, I need to see the results on the field first before I start supporting the team. I think it's backwards. You want to be supporting the team to help get them better so that you can make sure that the success on the field is what you want it to be.
And what cracks me up about that is Penn State people are so quick to jump to the support of Penn State in almost every other facet. Like everything else you could name, Penn State people are so behind it. And I just can't quite wrap my mind around why it is. And the only thing I can go back to is maybe it was just the lack of education. Maybe it was the structure of our collectives when everything initially started, where we kind of had two and there was in-house kind of competing, and, the politics of what a large university can bring to the table with something like this. But that's the one thing that I do want to ask you about. Do you think that the education side, and I think that's part of the reason why you and I are sitting here talking right now, is just education on this and trying to bolster it, because I do think that it was a problem from the beginning. As a letterman and as somebody who
knew what the whole landscape of NIL was, knew what other programs were doing. I just don't think that we did a good enough job educating our fans on the value of this and the reciprocal nature of what it can be. And also, to your point, it being such a fluid environment and not playing within a set rule of parameters, that there's a ton of creativity in there to ultimately make this work. And we have tons of extremely smart and successful business people in our alumni association that can give to this, that just, I think, really need to just give it a chance. Sit down with the right folks, whether that's Pat Kraft, whether that's somebody from the collective, whether that's myself or Adam or Michael Motti or Jordan Hill, guys who've played and who've been involved in this in some capacity. Just sit down and have the conversation and learn about the different ways in which the value adds can be reciprocal, because obviously, the whole tax deductible donation thing's out the window for Congress, but I still think that there's value to be found here, and we have the people to be creative enough to find that.
Absolutely. And what I would add to that is you don't need to have $1 million, $500,000, $100,000, whatever number you are comfortable contributing, particularly if you own a business, you can make it work in NIL. Yeah. And what I mean by that is if you want Drew Aller to send a tweet to his many thousands of followers, which is something that you can track, something that you can measure, there's a price for that. And it's probably not as obstructive as you might think that it is, even if it's just one time. But you can do that one time and make that deal one time, and you've done your job, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of other players who maybe don't have the same exposure that Drew does, but still have a decent social media following. And I'm not a social media guy. I don't have any social media accounts, but other than, LinkedIn, which is just for business. But I trust the fact that there are people out there who live and die by social media, and you're getting eyes on your company's logo, your company's website, your company's products, your company's services. And you don't need to be spending $1 million to get that out there. And so, one thing that I think is important to remember, and maybe to the education point that you raised, is if you're out there right now and you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I kind of get it, but I've got a small business and I don't have the marketing budget for these things. What I would recommend that you do is reach out to, a Dan Kabbalah at Penn State, who is very responsive. It's his job to help funnel these requests to the appropriate players and just say, hey, there's a player from, I'm based in this city, and there's a player on Penn State's roster from where we're at, and I'd love for him to send out a tweet to support my business. I guarantee you can make that happen at a very, very reasonable amount of money. And you're supporting NIL. And that goes a long way. And so, I think that the education has been, it's been lacking, but it's because things have been changing so quickly. And so the pace of things, rapid change has not been a feature of Penn State in any respect. And there's good things about that, and there's bad things about that. And in my opinion right now, it's more towards the bad side, because you have to be able to react and be able to change your position and to be able to adjust on a moment's notice. And that's just not how Penn State has been. On one hand, like I said, it's okay. There's something to be said about that. But the reality right now is that things are changing very, very quickly, and it's a brand new world, right? And so you have to be able to be willing to make adjustments, even if you're uncomfortable doing so, because things haven't always been operating that way. And that's one area where, in my opinion, I've seen a lot of struggles at Penn State, which is we're just not used to this, right? This is totally foreign to us. Fair enough, but it doesn't mean you can't adjust to it. Yeah. And so I think that that's one thing that I would say is, because I've had a couple of business owners come up to me and say, Rob, look, I love to support NIL, but I just don't have the budget for it. I think you'd be surprised. You could make a great deal with a player for 3 figures, and then see where it goes. Yeah. Right. And so I will say this. If you're, again, as someone who's not very social media savvy and someone who's not on social media, if someone came up to me and said, Rob, I'm going to pay you $100 to copy and paste a tweet, do we have a deal? I would say, where do I sign up? Right? Like, that's literally, that, and again, that's on the more simple, basic side, but look, that matters. That's important. And so I think that, on the education side, I would say, don't be afraid to reach out and talk to, the folks at Penn State and say, how can I help? Even if it's just, I've got $100 in my budget, there's a way to make that work. It's not just about the $1 million deals, the $100,000 deals, the $10,000 deals, the $1,000 deals. It's a lot of those smaller deals really can make an impact. And I think that it's a great value where if you're paying that amount of money to reach 50,000 people, that's pretty good. You can sell that to your board or to your supervisor or to your CEO. Particularly if it's in Pennsylvania and you've got, Penn State fans that are, supporting your business. So I think that there seems to be, on the education side, there seems to be this misconception that you have to be a multi-million-dollar company to be able to make things work. That is absolutely not true.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the one thing I've always talked about is just simple numbers, right? Like if we bat the normal sales average and we go to third of what our, like you said, participating alumni is for like $5 a month, like you start adding it up and it's like, dude, that's like a ridiculous amount of money that could just go into this pool. And then who knows what happens then from the incentivization, the success somebody sees, being able to reallocate budgets the next year and so on and so forth. The one thing you brought up was kind of the Penn State older ways and how they've gotten stuck in it. And we've had just now kind of getting reacclimated to the program myself and honestly not spending a ton of time at school. I was only in school for 2.5 years and just fast and furious in a completely different time, but not really taking the time to learn the larger scale of the donors and folks that are participating. We do have a substantial amount of folks who've been giving to Penn State prior to NIL, in a large capacity, and then who have been able to transfer that over to the new kind of wave, the old guard, new wave of NIL. What would you say to folks your demographic, your age? Because I think that's the natural evolution, right? Like I'm 29, I'm going to become 30. Like I'm kind of creeping up into that realm where, kids who I went to school with and classmates, they're starting to elevate themselves into different positions to be decision makers for these types of things. But you're kind of right in the heat of it right now. What would you say to your demographic to incentivize and understand that the old school way of giving that maybe their parents who own the business were doing isn't there? Mm-hmm. What would you say about that and the power of a youthful shot into this entire program?
Sure. And that's one thing that I'm very passionate about because, as you said, I think it's an untapped demographic that we have at Penn State. So I'm 42. I met my wife at Penn State. So I love Penn State. And one of the things that I love about Penn State is the football program, among many other things. But the football program is one of my passions. And what I would tell folks in that, late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s is, if you love Penn State football, if you love going to Beaver Stadium on a Saturday, you love tailgating, you love watching them on TV, the current way to support them is through NIL. And again, you don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but those are the rules. And so if you're in that demographic and beyond, I think you have to realize that a component of the success of the Penn State football program from here on out until the rules change, right, is that you have to support NIL. You have to support the collective. You have to make sure that there's a war chest there. Because if you don't, you run the risk of some bad results. And I raised one of those before. Could you imagine if a Nick Singleton, a Drew Aller, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, could you imagine if any one of them left to go to another program because they said, look, I can make more money elsewhere, or I can make a significant amount more money elsewhere. To the older folks, what I would say is look at Pitt right now. Now, there's a debate about whether Pitt's a rival to Penn State or not, but over the last 18 months, I am more convinced now than ever that Pitt football is in a death spiral right now because they can't keep any of their good players. They had that receiver that went to USC who was then drafted in the first round.
Right after he won the playoff.
Correct. So they can't keep anyone worth a damn. They can't attract anyone worth a damn. And they're in the ACC right now, which, if I'm in the ACC, even if I'm Clemson, even if I'm one of the Florida State, I'm looking over my shoulder and going, shoot, I don't know that this conference is long for the world, right? Well, imagine if you're Pitt, you're in that conference with, Florida State and Clemson, but you can't keep any of your talent. You can't attract any of your talent. What do you think's going to happen to them? And so, I don't say that to gloat on the demise or what I believe is the demise of Pitt, but I think the writing's on the wall for them. And so what I would tell Penn State fans is look at Pitt. You don't want to be Pitt. You've never wanted to be Pitt. Whether you think there's a rivalry there or not is irrelevant. But what I'm bringing that up for is I don't know that Pitt is – I don't think it's an understatement to say that in 10 years from now, Pitt football might not be around anymore. And part of that reason is because of NIL, the current state of college football, and, where all of that ultimately amounts to. And if you can't get the players, if you can't win, if you can't get fan support, if you can't pay your players through NIL, well, those players are going to go elsewhere. And I think Pitt is a perfect case study of that because they lose everybody anyone over the last 18 months that's been any good there has gone elsewhere. And they've not really been able to bring in anybody else. Look at the draft results. So that to me, hopefully, if you're an older alumni at Penn State and the good old days, with the rivalry with Pitt, look at what's happened to Pitt. You don't want that to happen to Penn State. Now, I'll be honest, I don't think that's ever going to happen to Penn State. But I think what it does show is what happens when you have an apathetic fan base with no or minimal NIL support in a conference that is perhaps not long for this world. Go look at Pitt. That is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's a great use case. And like you said, I think fortunately we're not in that position. And I also don't want to make it seem like we're not successful in NIL. Like we are to a large degree because of the names of the players that you mentioned and that we've been able to retain them. And again, I think the bigger question for me is because there's always going to be pushback. People like social media, people have voices. Like people are going to not participate and continue to complain. That's just the world we live in. There's armchair quarterbacks. There's more access to have your voice heard than ever before in today's society. And that's just part of it. But what I really want to get out of this is to, like I said, incentivize those folks who may be on the line, who may have, a little bit of that. I don't quite believe in it. And I don't know, incentivize them with ways, whether it's business, whether it's, like you said, trying to tie it back to you're supporting Penn State. And I thought the line that you said about right now, the biggest way to make an impact with your dollars is not to get your name on some bench that's built in front of the football facility.
Yep.
Because the kids right now, and I can guarantee this because I've been in high school locker rooms the past few years coaching, I got a pulse of what the first question those kids ask when they walk in any building is, how much money can I make?
Yep.
The logo no longer sells itself. And for me, I think it's just activating that small 10, 15, 20% of folks who are either on the fence, not participating, or completely ignorant to this, right? Where they're just like, I'm so lost in the sauce. I love going to games. I'll continue to support that way. But I'm building a business, I got a family, whatever it is. There's still ways where all of this experience can impact all of those things.
Yeah. Well, the arms race has always been there, but as you said, it's shifted. So it's less now about facilities. It's less now about having your name on the bench or the weight room or whatever it is, because players will overlook, maybe they're not too thrilled about the dorms or the weight room, but they can quickly get over that if they're getting, a significant NIL check every month. And so that's you're still supporting the team. It's just shifting where those resources are going. So whereas before they were going to facilities because you wanted to have a lazy river in your player lounge. Well, okay, someone might be willing to overlook the fact that Penn State doesn't have a lazy river at Lash because they're getting paid X amount in NIL money. And I think that's an easy decision. I mean, and I think that if you ask any of the people that you're talking about, that category or that profile of people, which you can say, like, look, would you rather have the A+ dorm room or the A+ weight room, or would you rather have $100,000 extra in your pocket? I think the answer to that is pretty self-explanatory.
I'm telling you, it's the NFL model. I laugh when I got traded to Oakland. I'm not shitting you. I'll give the Jets a ton of credit. They had a great facility, when I got traded to Oakland, they literally had like elementary school roll-in cafeteria tables. They catered lunch every day, and it was like hot dogs and hamburgers. It was unbelievable. But to your point, like, that's not what moves the needle.
Right.
They had a decent weight room, not a phenomenal one. Like, guys were there to get paid, do their job, and go home and do what they're doing. And unfortunately, that's kind of where college football is going. But, it is what it is. Here's one thing that I will that I do kind of want to put a bow on this. Here's what I want to do to bring this home. One thing you brought up was one of the positive experiences you've had, and I think that this is something that folks on the fence who particularly own businesses or are hiring or are in a position where they have control of budget and then hiring and stuff like that. It's something I feel extremely strongly about is building relationships with not only players but families. The value in that as a business owner, as somebody who hires, because like you said, not all of these guys are going to play in the NFL. And one thing I feel extremely strongly about is athletes in general have a very unique set of soft skills due to the product of what they do that will lead to success in any business industry. And just one of my personal anecdotes, I had my first job, my first big boy job, after I got done with my career, after I got done finishing my degree, when I was done playing, was in cybersecurity and technology sales. I got to know the CEO through the guy that I trained with, and he literally was like, "You want a job?" And I was like, "Sure. What am I going to be doing?" He goes, "You're going to be selling this." And I was like, "I've got zero experience, bro." I don't care. He goes, "I've talked to you now 5-10 times. I think that you can be really successful in this." And he gave me a chance, and his name's Mark Porter, Highwire Networks, like, phenomenal. But without the personal anecdote there, what is the value of that? Like, I think that there is something that's not talked about enough, but the ability to really get to know these kids from the time they're 18. Sure. They're making business decisions. They're shaking hands. You're forcing them to be put in situations with deliverables in your deal where, hey, you're going to come to this event. You're going to come to this gala that I'm hosting.
Sure.
Like, the value of that then intrinsically that trickles down into hiring cycles and stuff like that.
Sure. So one of the things you said is really kind of getting in on the ground floor, right? And so the first ever NIL deal I did was with Zane Durant at Penn State when he was a freshman. He had never played a down of football, but he was from a key market that I'm in home building that we operate in. And my sell to my CEO was, look, NIL is brand new. I don't know if this is going to be around for a long time, but we've got a guy who's a hometown hero in Lake Nona, Florida, which is a big, it's a sub-market of Orlando. People know who he is. We're building in Lake Nona. We're building in all the surrounding areas. I'd love to let's take a flyer and see what happens. And it was one of the best marketing decisions we've ever made, because I got in on the ground level with Zane Durant, again, before he ever played a down of football. He had a great freshman year. We re-upped our deal his sophomore year, had a great sophomore year. We're re-upping our deal for his junior year. But had I waited until he was a junior to make that deal, I'd probably be paying a lot more. And that's a testament to Zane and his family, because they trust me. We've delivered on what we were going to do. They've delivered on what they were going to do. But when you get in on the ground floor and maybe you take a little bit of a chance, there's value in that, right? And there's value in that relationship, because I took a shot on him, he took a shot on me, and we're in this together at this point. And it's a cool feeling, just to be totally honest with you. It's really neat. And I'm very proud of Zane and his family. His family's wonderful. And we've expanded the relationship from there, because Zane did a camp for a free camp for kids back in Lake Nona. And I couldn't rush to give him money quick enough to let us be a sponsor. And he's doing it again this year. And before the ask was even made, I talked to his mom, Regina, and I said, Regina, I hope you would consider us again, because that was great. And we did it again. We're doing it again. It's July 20th this year, by the way. But if I sell one house out of that, I've more than made back my money. Yeah. And I'm confident that I've done that. And so in addition to the financial side of things, where it's mutually beneficial financially, if Zane came to me tomorrow and said, Rob, I need you to build me a house, I need you to build my family a house, or I'm done with football, I want to come work for you, he's hired on the spot. Yeah. On the spot, because he's a genuinely good guy. He's not just a good football player, but a good person, comes from a great family, and we can teach him up, we can train him up to do anything he wants. And so that's been a great experience, for me. Same thing with Cam Miller. Cam is from Jacksonville. That's where we're based. A lot of people know who he is here. And it was kind of the same thing. We took a shot on him his freshman year. It was a small deal, nothing really significant, but it's worked out well. And now he's going to get a bigger deal this year. And so it's a long-winded way of saying that it's cool to see these guys develop and get in on the ground level, see how they progress as men, but then see the mutually beneficial arrangement that comes out of that. And so I've been happy with that. Not every deal is going to be $1 million deal, as we've said, but that's not the point. The point is making those connections, getting deals done, regardless of the number, and good things are going to happen.
That's fantastic. I'm telling you what, Rob, that one might be the best explanation and reciprocal example that I've come across. And dude, I appreciate you. I know the program appreciates you. We'll have to get one when we're up in State College this year, smoking a
Absolutely.
Stoke.
Well, have a cigar and a beer, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, a cigar and a beer, and chop it up some more. But listen, I appreciate you taking the time on a Monday night. We'll make sure we do this again, like I said.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christian. Appreciate it.
All right, brother.
Take care.